Welcome to the Rebuild Procurement podcast, where we dive deep into topics to keep procurement people, up to date and ahead of their peers. First off, subscribe on YouTube, whether or not you like this. It's helpful. We need it. Let folks find this. On today's episode, we're going to do basically two things, Alan. We're going to talk about insurance policies. So a lot's been happening with LA, very tragic, but then also the stories of insurance and some folks having things canceled. We'll talk kind of how insurance works. We may get some things wrong, but that's what fact checking is for in the comments. And then we'll deep dive on goals, how you and I look at goals, what we're looking at in 2025, and let's dive into it. I am Tom Finn. I bring 15 years on the client side, procurement, finance, category management experience in large and small cap orgs.
And I'm Alan Vika, procurement geek on the sell side of our street. And I've assembled a team of superhuman procurement professionals who are sitting right here today doing managed services at our company that we call Summit Procurement.
As Alan points at a wall.
Yeah, sorry. I half thought that maybe I should broadcast live from the middle of the bullpen.
Yeah.
We've got 25 people sitting in the office working together, and
That's
the
awesome.
camaraderie is thick.
It's good
awesome.
for you guys. That is fun. It's always fun to get together. I'll be meeting with some people this week in New York as well. So it was always great to see folks in real life.
Yep.
All right. So, Alan, we have some other topics, but I think we'll just focus. So just to give some background for folks, if you're not following any of the news, there's been some horrible, really tragic wildfires out in California, specifically this time in the LA area. Not going to go into what made up the wildfires, but there's very wealthy areas. I think a lot of wooded areas were hit this go around. California has had a bit of history around wildfires and, essentially burning of homes, right? They roll through. Yep. So I was thinking just from put some of that to the side because it is tragic. But then there's a lot of this conversation around insurance policies. I think some folks are saying the insurance companies, they had, insider knowledge of sorts that led them to cancel policies that folks are holding on to for 20 years. And it did it, 6 months before, 1 year before. What the heck's going on? So I was thinking we could talk a little bit about insurance.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I mean, it is tangential to what we do in procurement. I mean, oftentimes inside of a procurement organization, it's one of your category managers that's in charge of buying insurance. And I find that insurance is a pretty competitive marketplace. So at Summit, when I bought insurance for us, we work with a lot of financial services clients. In their master services agreements, they outline in great detail the sorts of insurance that you need to carry. It's across 8 or 10, sometimes 12 different categories, and you might have to go to multiple insurers to get that insurance. Not inexpensive. So typically you'd use a broker to go out and help you get this. But what I've found is the insurance companies are pretty competitive against one another. So that's a little bit of the backdrop behind some of the things that are happening down in Southern California right now. It is a competitive industry. It's not just a cost plus industry. So everybody stands the risk of losing big amounts if they don't get their insurance policy issuance process right. Maybe since we're on this broad topic of insurance, maybe I'll just stay ahead, be smarter than your peers, maybe just make one little note about if you're negotiating a deal where you have to have a certain amount of insurance. Here's the dirty little secret. I've only had one of probably a couple dozen clients that said, no, what's in the MSA you need to sign up for. And if you don't go get that insurance, we won't do a deal with you. Most of the times, that part of the master services agreement is fairly negotiable. So if they tell you you need $10 million of cyber insurance in order to do business with them, and you only have 5, you can probably go back and negotiate and say, hey, we have 5. Here's our policy. Here's our COI, our certificate of insurance. If you show it to them, they'll typically say, okay, you can 5 is good enough. Just mark it as such in the MSA, red line it in the MSA, and we'll accept it. So just a little pointer.
Yeah, a lot of companies, that's like from the selling into company side, and from the buy side of it. Yeah, it is generally the folks that handle like, is this okay? Yes or no, is like your finance team will look a lot of that. They're kind of like the
Yep.
internal risk folks if they don't have a risk department, which like most don't for those specific things. So yeah, a lot of the like there's probably two ways to. There's you have general liability, and then mostly like the workers' comp type stuff, which that kind of is what it is per state,
Yep.
and then the professional liability, and then like the cyber security and these other ones,
All of that.
like the most
Automotive,
yeah
lots of
auto
stuff.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of matters for what you're doing, and understanding your own business is important to be able to like clearly explain why. If you have a clear explanation, most on the sourcing procurement side, they can use that and pass it over to finance. So the ones that they're all negotiable. I think to your point, like no company should really, that's on the buying side of it. No company should really be going under like $1 million. Like most of your suppliers should have $1 million. I think, Alan, $1 million's reasonable to get, right?
Very.
$10 million can be more difficult. So the ways you can
Especially in
cover that,
cyber.
sure, yeah, because everyone gets hacked, right? It doesn't matter if you find it or not. But like, just always remember umbrella policies, things of that nature that can cost a little less money, but can cover, multiple things. And then, so yeah, I agree with that, Alan. And I consider, when I think about insurance for purposes of this conversation, there's that contractual insurance, which, yeah, I mean, is negotiable. Then you have maybe like your benefits side of things, like healthcare benefits. And then these like property risk loss insurance, which if you're in like manufacturing, it'd be to cover your manufacturing plant, or if you're in real estate, is to cover homes, like commercial things of that nature. And then you just have like your own, policy for your house. The competitive marketplace, totally true. Folks should always work through a broker. I mean, you always do. Usually these insurance companies only work through those brokers. The just to get into like this LA and folks getting dropped. I mean, I think there's a lot of like governmental background. This probably would be important to understand. I'm not going to really get into it, but like states generally, I think in general, they manage how much folks can charge within their state. So certain states will take on some of the liability. So they'll create their own version of like a fund to support, or they'll go to the federal government. In this case, I think the federal government said they would cover a lot of these LA losses. Same goes with like hurricanes. So, but what insurance companies do is they're like risk mitigators. The number that I've been told by smart people I've worked with is like, if you're dealing with an insurance company, if you're getting fully covered, so on your healthcare benefits, if you're going to pay X million dollars per year and have all your folks covered, the payout ratio is usually like 80-20. So an insurance company always expects to make 20% of the full amount that they're receiving. So if they're receiving $100, they expect to pay out 80 and receive 20 to use for whatever they need to use it for. So when things
overhead,
like
the expenses of running the business, of managing the business,
managing profit as well, they don't want to eat into that.
As soon as that creeps up above 80 and approaches 90, then they're insolvent, they're bankrupt, and the insurance policy is no good. And that's what happened 15, 20 years ago, is a lot of the insurance policies that were meant to cover some of the catastrophic things that happened in the financial markets blew up, and everybody who thought they had coverage had no coverage. The bank ran out, in essence.
And then they don't want those customers, right? You don't want customers that you're going to have to pay too much for, where it's going to be, you're making 100% as opposed to receiving, or you're bringing in 100% as opposed to receiving that 20, you're paying out 10. That's not a customer that they want as the one providing services or whatever insurance. So it sounds like, I'm sure there'll be plenty conspiracies that continue on. But some of the smartest people I've known have gone into insurance. They love math nerds, right? I have a cousin that works for an insurance company, super smart. I've had friends that go into like actuarial sciences. Insurance companies love actuarial science folks because they're super good with numbers. They're super good with just understanding and pulling together, different models and using different models. They look forward and say, how much is this risk going to make me? Right? I'm paying a certain amount to do something. I'm covering folks. How much am I going to make on the back end? So within California specifically, it sounds as if, like, I've heard for years, like California is going to, like, more or less, like, it's dry and there's a high probability things will catch on fire. So if you have $50 million homes in the middle of that, you may not want to cover that as a company, right? As a person, you hope they get covered, but as
Yeah.
a business, it doesn't fit the business model.
And I would say, again, not trying not to tread too much into the politics of it, but I'm a homeowner as well. And it's fascinating. When I apply for my homeowner's insurance, which covers fires, they ask a whole bunch of detailed questions about your house, about where it's located, about do you have a sprinkler system? Do you have fire detectors? Are
Fence
they
around a
integrated?
pool, right? A fence around a pool.
All of that, and those are fair game questions because again, the actuaries in there are trying to manage that math that says, okay, we want to take less risky customers, or we want to charge less risky customers a lower premium and higher risk customers a higher premium, and it's just natural. So, it's I think in the case of Los Angeles, undoubtedly these insurance companies were that check and balance who are looking at the reservoirs, who are checking water management policies, brush management policies, and saying, "Hey, you guys are you're out of whack here, right? We have to raise rates if you're going to take on this degree of risk." And everybody wants to paint them as the bad guy, but in the end, they're just the ones, unfortunately, who have to deliver the bad news that say, "Hey, you're getting into a high risk situation here." So there's something that's supposed to be listened to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it really is like they just have very, air quotes, intelligent models and that they rely on to help them make decisions. And then outcomes where folks got things, policies canceled. But the same thing could happen if you have like a manufacturing plant in that area, it will probably affect you. To your point, Alan, if you
Yeah, for sure.
if you have, I don't know, if you haven't replaced your roof in years or whatever it may be, you also may have a little bit higher of a premium. I'm not sure everything that goes into those models, but that's the type of thing. I remember seeing like the commercials, like for auto insurance. It was like, yeah, if you just want to like connect this thing to your car, like you can get 10% off. It's because they want to measure you because they don't want to.
Yes.
They want to know if you're a good driver or not. And they say, all right, well, the good driver is probably going to accept this as well. So there's like, that because they opted in, they're probably less risky to begin with. And then we could also manage the heck out of them and use that data. So it's very data driven, very outcome driven, and the expectation of their shareholders to make a profit driven.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I like that. In the end, they're a check and balance that's an important part of the ecosystem of our entire financial management system.
yeah.
So,
Insurance, reinsurance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So back to the example inside my business, we pay a hefty premium for all of these fairly maxed out insurance levels. It's not a small number every year, and it's not a small amount of time we spend going through audit processes and everything else to make sure that they ask us to do, so that they make sure that we're a safe bet. And the checks and balances, the feedback loop that goes on in that process is super helpful because they'll ask me questions about our IT infrastructure, and I'll understand.
Jesus.
Oh yeah, and I'll
Oops.
understand. Wait, I answered no to this question. I'm guessing my rates would be lower if I answered yes.
Yeah.
So then I get with my
team.
Yeah, exactly. I get with my third party IT management company, and I say, what do we need, Steven? What do we need to do to lower our risk on this front? So now we've got phishing and spam filters in place. We've got mandatory training that's happening on all things IT. So there's several things that we can do to, I like to think of it as increase the wall on our fortress, or widen the moat around our castle. And hopefully that'll keep our insurance rates reasonable, maybe lower them a bit. You just have to participate in the continuous feedback loop that is all things in life.
Yeah. Question, Alan, do you have to pay additional for just as a supplier for companies, do you have to pay additional for every client you bring on and have to like add to that policy, or is it kind of one policy and then
it's one policy, and it's
okay,
much
no
more
matter
driven.
Number of customers?
Yeah, that's right. It's driven by number of employees for sure. And
so if you have to bring on more
everything
folks,
else,
then
yeah, that's right. But what I would say is it's very dependent upon the client. So some clients, I already mentioned one client that would not sign the master services agreement unless we agreed to every single element of their insurance requirements. In that instance, we had to up some of our policies if we wanted to take them on as a client, which we did. So it's only in some instances where they are really sticklers for wanting the max policies.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah, was it just just to close out the topic. I mean, there's a lot that goes into insurance. They're a business just like anyone, working here. They have expectations of return for investment. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's a sad situation and it kind of really stinks. But I wonder what'll happen to those, like, to your point of adjustments and they being part of an ecosystem. If the rates go up, the prices go down for the assets, whatever they may be. Like, and that is kind of a calibration. So we'll see where it lands for California. It's super unfortunate what everyone's going through there, but that's just a little bit of background around what goes into the pricing and how that kind of gets structured from an insurance
Yeah,
side.
yeah, good topic.
Yeah.
Timely
Yeah.
topic.
So yeah, for zero ability to make a transition here, Alan, as I like to. But I think from there, that's kind of our, the one we touch on up front. But on the back end here, we have goals. So right now we're in the, week 2 of 2025. I thought it'd be good just to go through, I think both you and I, whether or not we set or achieve goals during a year and how often they get adjusted.
I'm aimless. I just bounce from
Yeah.
thing to thing.
They meander, maybe not adjusted, but meander, change with times, whatever term we would want to use. I was thinking it would be, I mean, we talked about this, but just like how we plan out our year and how we think through our year or quarter or week or month, whatever it may be, just to chat through this.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a great topic, and I think I feel like I say this quite often on this podcast. A lot of my discussion about this topic will be aspirational. Like, do I do all of the things I'm about to tell you? No way. Like, it's hard. It's hard to achieve 100% success on some of these things that are incredibly strategic, remarkably important, but they take time and they take thoughtfulness. So I think what I will probably outline is how I think about it is, having been on this earth for a few years, kind of arrived at a spot that I think works for me. I kind of came at this, luckily, in a roundabout way. I like to think a lot, and I believe that I think good thoughts and good ideas and come up with important strategic things. But there was a time in my life, probably 25 years ago, where I realized unless you're writing it down, you're not being intentional enough about it. You can think a lot of things and then forget a lot of things. So one of the big turning points for me was it's kind of tangential to the goal discussion, but was just keeping a journal. And then that became my accountability mechanism, where I wrote down what I was thinking, and I would always make a point to go back and look at it a year later and say, what was I thinking a year ago? As I wrote down what I'm thinking today, and that became kind of one of the best steps I think I made in terms of setting goals, because I do think that there's a lot. I'm going to make a big push for it. There's a lot for looking back on last year and taking account of where you are today, and then casting forward for the next year. That really helps you set manageable goals and realistically helps you achieve them. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. But Tom, why don't you riff a bit on how you think about it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think one thing that I dislike about goals, and I've had to do these just as an employee over the years, is like you have that one goal for the whole year, and it's like 5 of them, and then you have to detail out like the itty bitty pieces of how to get there, and it's like, I think the idea is fine, but it's just like life doesn't work that way, and businesses don't work that way. So I think there's flexibility is an important piece. Just like, they say like be kind to yourself kind of thing, right? You don't want to get like too hard on yourself over goals and like meeting every single thing. Of course, when it's like part of your career, like you gotta meet certain stuff. But yeah, for me, is also writing things down, Alan. I'm notorious for like going from one, like I've gone not I got away from the sticky notes, but still every once in a while there's a sticky note that falls up on my desk because I'm like, that'll be good to remember something because it's a little different and it's the one thing that stands out. But yeah, I have like I'll go from a notebook to I have like one of the Kindles that they can write on now, which I love, but it doesn't like fit every circumstance. But yeah, for me, when I was at a pretty like I remember specifically when I started writing, and I also journal, not as often as you, and I don't take as like clear notes I think as you, but the like just the act of like beginning to write down was like something that made me realize what I like needed to do. And in that specific instance, it was like mission in life, get out of the role I'm in and like get to something else. And it was like something else was better than this. So like I wrote it down, and I actually still have that note. And I see it every once in a while. I don't even know where it's at. I think it's like in my drawer. And like, when you're cleaning, you're like,
Awesome.
and I leave it there in like a
That.
unmarked position that I like purposely forget just to come back to every once in a
Yep.
while and be like, okay, good. But yeah, for me, like just the act of writing things down and like the weekend closeout, which I'm not always consistent with, but I try to be, of like what I need to do for the next week. Like those are like on an ongoing basis. On the like, so I kind of think of goals differently. There's like these long-term ones, then there's like these medium-term, and then like the short daily, weekly one. So in the long term, I have them written down somewhere. And I think there's also like interesting examples of this. Chris Sacca, he's a pretty well-known investor. He's
Smart guy.
like, yeah, he worked at Twitter. He did a few different, he's like friends with all those insiders. Like when like Travis at Uber, like he was part of like that
Yeah.
whole, working up. He was like that legacy. He had an early, I think he was on like the Tim Ferriss podcast. He walked through some of that, like around how he found a note, I don't know if his mom or dad found it, of when he was like 16 or 18, like, I want to be this, I want to do that. I was like, dang, I achieved these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like Mr. Beast for other folks, he's like a content creator on YouTube. He has like an Amazon show now. His company's worth like $1 billion. He recorded himself saying how he wanted to be a YouTube star and like what was important to
Yep.
him. I think like committing to yourself, of like sitting down and saying like, what's the most important thing to me that I want to get done, before I die, or by the age of X, like, what do I want? Like the act of writing it down kind of memorializes it into your head.
Yes.
So I think just the writing aspect, and then we can go a little more into like within the year, but I think just the writing, to your point, Alan, I agree with, is like, start writing. It's amazing what
Yeah.
pen to paper or even keys to key or fingers to keyboard could do.
Yeah, let's go really old school because obviously this topic stretches back hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of years, perhaps even. But one of the things that I found fascinating, my scientific brain, somebody said, "Oh, you need to read this book by Napoleon Hill. It's called Think and Grow Rich."
Mm-hmm.
You heard that? You heard of that book, Tom?
Yeah. I actually,
Yeah.
I have it. I got it from Libby. If you know, like Libby is like a library app.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have it. Actually, I think I have it on my. I think I have it here.
And I thought it was a bunch of woo woo. I was like, the science brain in me said, how could this work? This is stupid. So I read it. And I would say it's only many years later after reading it, I still kind of thought it was woo woo. But now the neuroscientists are talking about this, and they're saying, basically, meaning and purpose is everything in life. So the first thing you have to do is say, here's what I want. I have a goal. I'm at A today, and I want to get to B. That's the I want to be rich. So what's the first step? Well, you think about being rich, and then you grow into being rich. So if you're at A and you want to get to B, you first have to define both A and B. Where am I today? Where do I want to get to? Then your brain, kind of in the background almost for free, starts to chart that path and generates negative emotion when you are moving away from that path, and generates positive emotion when you're moving toward that path, when you're headed to the B that you want to get to. So it does have a basis in some real kind of behavioral mechanisms that are inbuilt in us as humans. So, you gotta first define where you are and where you want to be.
Yeah, which isn't always easy, right? Like the where I am today. I call it like the from to. If I'm presenting out like objectives for like to get buy-in from people, it's like, all right, we're going to do like the from to, right? So we have to have the starting position of, we do things like this today, and yeah, like that sucks, right? There's not who agrees that's horrible. It's like everybody. All right, and then we want to be over here to the to, like everyone on board that looks better than the old way. Yeah, okay, and then it's like, then you have the act of going through it, of how to get there, but yeah, you have to have your own buy-in.
Yeah, that's right. So, a lot of people will call this the 3-step mechanism of stop, start, continue. You've probably heard of that before. So as you're sitting and thinking about what you're going to do for the next year, as you're thinking about what's going to get you from A to B, 1 to 2, you need to say, okay, what do I want to stop doing that I'm doing today? What do I need to start doing more of that I might be doing or I might not be doing, but it would help me get toward my goal? And then what are things I'm doing today that I just need to continue? And that's a pretty basic, simple framework for doing some of this work. I heard maybe a better way recently that somebody put it. They called it the compounding projection. So that sounds complicated, but you think about how your time compounds. This is the compounding projection. So projecting into the future. Ask yourself these two questions. If I repeated every action I took today for a year, where would I end up? And number two, is that the place I want to be? Is that state B? Is that state two? So you ask yourself those two questions. If I repeated every action I took today for a year, would I end up where would I end up? And is that the place I want to be? And then once you've asked yourself those two questions, you start to think about what you want to do every day that will compound if you did it every single day to get you to your end state that you hope for.
Yeah. Like simple example might be one, just like, hey, I want to understand politics better, right? I'm either happy or stressed today, and I just want to understand more tomorrow so I can have more like just in-depth intellectual conversations. If you read for 10 minutes a day, the politics session, on like 3 different types of platforms, then you'll understand at the end of 365 days, you're going to be more well-versed than most people. Just as a very simple one.
Yep. I like that.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And so maybe to get into some of the weeds of a mechanism that I use to do this goal setting, I've got I've discovered this site called Year Compass. And it's probably a little bit overkill. There's a famous quote that says, "I have the ability to kill anything by overscoping it." This might be under the heading of an overscope.
Overscoping or never starting because you're, too in the building phase.
That's exactly right. So, so it's this is what Year Compass looks like. It's basically a PDF spreadsheet, but you can go to Year Compass. I believe it's yearcompass.com. Let me see if that's correct. Yeah, yearcompass.com. And
so this
is
a PDF, Alan?
It's a PDF. So the idea is get out your old-fashioned pen or pencil, print this sucker out. It's like 20 pages. And it asks you first, it's broken into 2 halves, last year and next year. So in the past year, it says this is the most time-consuming part of it. I think that you could spend easily 2 or 3 days, full days, working on this if you're at a point in your life when you're super busy. But it basically says go through your last year's calendar week by week, and if you see an important event, a family gathering, and write it down here. Now, one of the keys that I found to this is don't just go to your calendar, go to your photo app on your phone and look through all the pictures from the last year, because that'll remind you of some things you did, whether or not
I did that with my son the other day. He was like, "Oh, can we see blah blah blah?" I was like, "Oh my gosh, that happened last year. How awesome!"
I did a lot, yeah. And you see all the things you do, and then it just goes through a series of, I think, very introspective questions to say, this is what my last year was about in these different categories: personal life and family, career studies, friends, relaxation, hobbies, physical fitness, mental health, habits, and what you're doing to make a better tomorrow. And then you ask these 6 sentences: the wisest decision I made, the biggest lessons I learned. So, you kind of get the gist of it. And then the whole idea is to really force you to spend some reflective time on the last year. What did I do? What were the best times? What were my biggest accomplishments? And then it kind of has, to your point, this notion of forgive yourself. Okay, there places where I fell short. What do I need to forgive myself for, and what I need to let go of? And then you kind of summarize your last year in 3 words. You read a title of the book that would describe your last year, and then you say goodbye to it. And then boom, you move into the year ahead, right? Then you do basically a forward-looking version of what you just did. You dream big about what you want to accomplish. You detail that out in different areas. And then you do these things called magical triplets. So you say, here are the 3 things that I like about myself. Here's 3 things I want to let go of. So it's kind of that stop, start, continue. And then you just detail these triplets out to say, here's what I'm going to accomplish in the next year. And I think it really does a good job focusing your thoughts on what's most important to you, because you can't go into the year with 10 goals. It's hard enough to go into the year with 3 goals. So it helps you to distill down those things that are most important to you. And I find this exercise to be incredibly valuable.
How much did this cost, Alan?
Free.
Oh, is it free?
Absolutely free.
I may actually use that.
Now, you want to hear something fun? So I got 4 kids. It's funny. You got all kinds of different kids. And I was like, I'm going to do this with my kids. And then I was like, okay, wait a minute. No, that kid won't do it. That kid will actually make fun of me for doing this. But I had 2 kids who would reasonably
not interested in being made fun of.
Exactly. I'm too proud for that. So, I know my kids. So one kid's out of the house, but I've got this captive 18-year-old, the baby in the family. And so we had a week together. My wife was traveling, and I said, Joe, we're going to print this out. We're going to sit down and do this together. Because that's one of the things they encourage you to do. They say, yeah, you can do this with friends. It's obviously a highly personal sort of thing. So do it for yourself and share what you think you want to share. And he and I spent some really good quality time talking through what I consider to be the most important things in life, because he was doing this. And daggone it, if he didn't spend probably 3 times as much time on this than I did.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and he's 18. He's in his freshman year at college, and he said, "Dad, if I'd done this last year, I would have had nothing." Like he said, I wasn't thinking strategically last year, but I was also in high school. I just wasn't doing things. And then he detailed, because he'd done it. He's like, "This year I did this and this and this and this, all these kind of big life changes for him." And he said, this helped me sit down and think about it. So it was a good exercise.
Yeah, it's interesting. So my son's a little younger, 10 years behind. He's 8. So one thing we talk every night at dinner, right? Just like, oh, how's your day? Blah, 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 blah. And he was telling me yesterday about how LeBron James, he's like, Dad, do you know LeBron James, like, he shoots with his right, but did you know he's lefty? And then he had wanted to, he learned from somebody that was a righty, therefore he learned. So he's always ambidextrous, blah, 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 blah. And like, I write with my left, but I throw with my right. Like, I'm a little backwards myself. So, yeah. So, but he's like yesterday at dinner, he's like, do you see how I'm eating? I was like, no, Tommy. He's like, I'm eating with my left. I was like, oh, interesting. And then we went through and talked through. He's like, I'm going to do this so that I get a stronger, like, so I could be better on like both sides of my body. And I was like, that's good. And then kind of like walked him through, like, if you do that, like he was already saying it, but I was just reaffirming, like, oh yeah, if you do that over time, like that's exactly. He's like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. We'll see. That was day one, right? But I think just to the idea, I think it's a good exercise just for folks to go through, just the combination effect of like combination in both look back. So like, if I do this every day, then this will equal what I want. Yes, no. But like the look back and like building that muscle of just assessing yourself in a positive way, right? It's not to kick yourself in the butt each time. It's just like, am I going the same direction? Like there's a fork in the road. I went left. Do I need to go right?
There's a little bit of accountability there, a little kick in the butt that says, I have a negative emotion because I'm moving away from what I thought was my goal. And,
I just meant don't get depressed.
I'm going to get better.
Like,
I know that serves.
Some people take it extreme, and therefore they don't get started. That's what I mean.
Agreed.
Like, you want to do it because it's a positive outcome is the idea. Like, yeah, but it's like, still turn the wheel left, right.
I completely agree. There's another one of my favorite sayings, and this applies across so many aspects of my life, is when you're at your highest high, just remind yourself you're not that good. And when you're at your lowest low, always be sure to remind yourself you're not that bad.
Mm-hmm. I've heard the same thing from super intelligent people, and totally agree. Like, yeah, don't take it. Just don't say like we're the bee's knees when you're at the top, and like you couldn't be any worse when you're at the bottom. It's like, come on, like life is a long journey. Like, play this out, and you want to be more highs than lows, but you're going to hit lows
for sure.
So one interesting way. So maybe just two other things here, Alan. I guess we're not necessarily going to go through our own goals here, but like one way from a yearly standpoint that I didn't buy this, nor will I. You could kind of you could think through it on your own, but there's this guy, Jesse Isler. Do you know Jesse Isler?
I think I've seen his name. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, he's like, you might have seen his name for various reasons. He had David Goggins. If you're familiar with David Goggins,
Sure.
Him was like Living with a Seal or something like that was the book.
Yeah,
that was Jesse. Yeah. And then he also he's married to Sarah Blakely, who started Spanx, and he started his own companies. He was successful in his own right. So let me see if I could share here. But he has this thing called the Big A, pound calendar. Can you see my screen here?
Yeah.
So it's basically a whole year's worth of this thing's $50. I'm probably not going to buy it because you could think
dry erase, reusable.
It might be. Is it reusable? Oh yeah, dry erase. Look at
no,
that.
Maybe it's just you can change your goals when you haven't hit it. You can lower them.
Yeah, well, I think that's also
2025 on it.
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, you could just zoom in, and he's not like hiding anything. It's 365 days to go through, and it's just one big calendar. And his thing, I listened to him on a podcast. I heard him in a few different places, but like you'll see, he's like kind of like maps out his day. He has his own different ways of laying out just how he wants to achieve certain things, and he kind of thinks around like how much time do I have left, because I have a lot I want to achieve. It's not in a depressing way; it's a positive way, and just like I have so much time, but I have a lot of stuff. So let's get after this. Um,
Yep.
so, but this just lays it out per week, per day, really, and it's just a way to kind of think through. Is also a bit stressful, right? Seeing the whole year and mapping it out all at once. But I think
No kidding. That's
it's just a different way
small.
to look.
Yeah.
Different way to look at it. And for me, to manage myself, I'm probably going to use what you shared there on a yearly basis. I don't have a good format for that. But what I did this year, my wife was like, "I don't think you're going to use it. I'm going to use it." It's a whole agenda. So it's like a personal weekly, monthly planner. I pay it's like $8 this thing, but it goes through like each month your
Bargain.
goals, what you're grateful for, and then it has the calendar for each month. Then it has a weekly planner to go through the goals. Let me give a page here, just like on a weekly basis. Let me tell me if you can see it or not, Alan. So
A little
see
bit.
if
Yeah,
anyways
that's
might be
good.
backwards.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
it's like the top 3 items, like your to-do list, shopping list,
Yes.
like notes
That's
and
right.
ideas, and then it has just the Monday through Sunday on there, just like
Yep.
right through. And it's not for everything. I keep my notes somewhere else, but this is like I lay my week out much more simply. It's good for me from an organization standpoint. I tend to get like not
Sure.
overwhelmed, but like just got a bunch of stuff going on. And if I get segmented, I
Yeah.
realize that I feel much more calm. And this has been a
Of
calming
course.
factor for me. So something
That's
I'm
good.
doing new this year that I haven't done historically.
Order from chaos. That's the idea. And when it's all stuck inside your head, it's a bit chaotic. And when you have to write it out and you're intentional about it, you can make some order out of that chaos.
They call
I
like
would
get
go,
the monkey. What is it like the monkey?
yeah,
Like put it on the
monkey
page or
mind.
something like that. I'm
Yeah, that's right.
totally ruining whatever that is.
Well, it's it's an interesting thing when I think back through this year compass that I just showed. Part of the idea is they want you to write everything down so you can see too much. Like there's a generative phase of that process where you're just writing it all down and there's too much. But again, when you get to the next year, the whole idea is now we're doing the opposite. We're starting to cut away. We're starting to cross things off. And just as important with any goal setting is to say what you're not going to do in a year. And those might be some very lofty and important things that you take on in future years or you've done in past years. But there needs to be an equal amount of focus on, because this is my number 1 or number 2 or number 3 goal, I'm not going to do 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to physically not do those things. I'm going to tell myself my golf game has to wait another year.
Yeah, mine's going to be forever waiting on golf, I think, until my kids are out of the house. But yeah, I think there's just that like being able to focus. And sometimes you also realize when you write all that stuff on the page that like some are, you can combine them, right? To actually meet what the goal
Yeah.
is. And you're going to do them anyway. Like those are things you want to do, like golf or like hobby or something. They might be at the top, but maybe there's like things that feed into that or things you have to cut away, right? You're not going to be able to focus on your golf game or, achieve these goals that you have set out if you're agreeing to other stuff within the organization to support. You got to build out that dashboard. Therefore, other things have to at least be pushed to the second half of the year or whatever it may be.
That's right.
And then you align. If it's for business, you then align on those goals. If it's for yourself, you got to maybe align with your wife or align with your spouse or significant other or just yourself that some things will have to wait.
Yeah, good discussion.
I agree.
Hopefully, we inspire a few people to.
I'm feeling
inspired,
Alan. I'm gonna go.
All right, let's go.
What was the website that you had there?
Yearcompass.com.
Yearcompass.com. They bought the .com.
They did.
Good for those folks. I'll go on and get that PDF and see what ads I get on the back end.
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like one of these new kind of outfits that when you read about them when you do that PDF download, they it's a completely voluntary sort of thing. It's a global thing, so they've got this translated into all languages. But the whole notion is, support us by giving us $1, and if we have enough people doing that, then what they're doing is not difficult. It's kind of just structural. I don't think they'll bother you too much.
Cool. I just got a 404 not found. So maybe they are newbies. I'm sure I just have to go with something else here. But I think it's awesome. I love this stuff. Me and you both
Yep.
love the idea of goals and working on this stuff. So this is the time of year to do it, right? Like you should always readjust. You should always revisit, say, am I focused on the right things? That's a positive outcome of even writing these things. You can refocus. So it excites me.
Agreed.
I always get energized in January.
Yep. Love it. And if it just happens to not be January when you're listening to this podcast, don't worry. Do it now.
Yeah.
When is the best time to plant a tree 20 years ago? When's the second best time? Today.
That's very true. It's very true. Love it.
All right.
All right,
Well,
Alan.
yeah. All right. I'm gonna do our outro here, Tommy. So on behalf of your humble hosts here at the Rebuild Procurement Podcast, we are Tommy Finn, as he's known in the Witness Protection Program, and your Pontifex of Procurement, Alan Veek, hoping you will make this a productive week in procurement. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on the Rebuild Procurement Podcast. Like and subscribe on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest procurement content.
Show me, and you won't hear the word rebuild.